Welcome, everyone, to the continuation of our series on mindfulness of thoughts. And this week, we're looking at relationships. And you'll see as we get into it a little more, how this ties into mindfulness of thoughts. And I mentioned, I think last session, the sessions before, how this is a rich area of practice for me personally in the recent past. And I think it's, for all of us, one of the fundamental Dharma teachers that we grow and learn from our relationships. We grow spiritually, you could say. And really the invitation is to welcome difficulties in relationships as valuable teachers. You know, it can be hard to do, especially when we're in the throes of a difficult relationship, but really to take that, take this seriously as an invitation to practice. This area of human relationships really brings out the most painful, I think, and unhealed aspects of our lives out into the open. So it's a very powerful teacher in this practice. So how it relates to thoughts, the vast majority of our relationship difficulties come from believing a rather simple thought or collection of thoughts. It really comes from, it's quite simple when you really look at it closely. And it's believing the thought that someone should be different. Believing the thought that somebody should be different than they are. You can see some of the light bulbs almost going off. And people, I could almost end the Dharma talk there, I think. But I did see some real recognition. And this was a real recognition for me, when this occurred. And I saw that deep suffering was occurring, and it was simply because I believed a thought. The thought was that this person should be different, should be behaving differently. So actually, most people, I think, when you look at it closely, don't really want to look at personal difficulties as a way of transformation. They don't want this particular teacher. They don't want relationships to be the teacher. They want relationships to make them feel happy, right? And good, appreciated, loved, secure, and so forth. Right? I think that's kind of the modus operandi, I could say, of getting into relationships. And in fact, looking a little deeper, we really want relationships to kind of cover over our unhealed pain and trauma through this process of people making us feel good and happy. So really, we want our relationships to kind of mask our core pain. And the more we do this, the more we rely on relationships to mask our core pain, the more we suffer. Because another person can never fulfill this expectation. Right? Another person can never do that for us. We can only do it for ourselves. And that's, again, the invitation here in this of this practice. So even if we're on a spiritual path or a path to spiritual awakening, when we feel threatened or our expectations are not met in a relationship, we tend to forget that such difficulties are the path. And instead we hold on to these believed thoughts that the person should be different somehow, that they should meet my expectations. And so we either lash out or we suppress, repress our reactions, kind of deny it and then suppress it because it's too painful to face. So what if we could approach difficulties in relationships in a different way? That's really what I'd like to talk more about, is a way that we can approach our relationships that directly supports our awakening, our discovering our essential nature, that nature of big heart that we're exploring in the guided meditation, the always present true heart. That's our essential nature that unconditionally loves, is love, can't be anything but love. So the first, and I think the very first thing that we need to do, the first step is to acknowledge that often in our relationships we want something. We expect this other person to fulfill some want or need, some desire. Right? We want to feel loved, we want to feel appreciated, we want to feel happy. So we have an agenda coming into the relationship. You could say that the I love you often means I need you. And we have an agenda. And this, this scenario might work for a while. But what happens when the other person doesn't live up to our expectations? What if we don't get what we want? What if we don't feel the way we want to feel from this relationship? Just reflect for a moment and reflect and think of a relationship that has gone off the rails, where there's been difficulties. What was the root of it? I know when I have reflected on this in the past, I've noticed that, wow, I had a deeply held believed thought that this person should behave in some expected way. In fact, I almost felt like there was a promise that they would. But of course, they never made that promise. It was just a perceived a thought that they had actually made such a promise. It went off the rails because something happened that didn't conform to this believed thought, this expectation that they should be some way that I thought they should be, not that they should be who they are. So often our relationships go off the rails because people don't meet our expectations of them. Some believed expectation. And this is seen as a promise from the other person when in fact they never made such a promise. Of course, we can, we can prefer that a person be a certain way. We have preferences. But that's different. We can have this preference, but our love for them does not depend on them meeting the preference. It's not a condition for love. It's really merely a preference. I'm not going to go too much into romantic relationships. I often get questions like this on retreats and so on. People have their difficulties in romantic relationships, but we can see when we look deeply that they are full of expectation believing. They're full of these believed thoughts that come in the form of expectations. Like each person comes into a romantic relationship with believed thoughts that are kind of almost requirements for the relationship to be successful. Requirements such as care, attention, appreciation, time, and so forth. But satisfying the requirements of the other person is often not the priority. So each person has this requirement, expectation, believed expectation, but that's really not the priority of the partner. In fact, a lot of times they don't even know what the expectation is. That creates you can see the difficulties that creates. So it's often not a priority. Each is driven by their needs, which are believed thoughts, but neither the other isn't prioritizing these needs. So inevitably there's struggle, right? There's conflict, there's struggle. It's inevitable. Conflict happens. When our relationship expectations are not met, conflict happens. It's inevitable. So the practice, another key aspect of this practice would be to use such reactivity as a signal, kind of a bell, a wake-up bell, a mindfulness bell, to see it. You may see blaming behavior when we see thoughts of blaming another person. That can be a signal, another mindfulness bell. So we begin to notice this kind of reactivity, this blaming. It might come in the form of thoughts such as this person should not have done this, or I hate it when she, he, they do this, or this isn't fair or right. If you hear these thoughts arise, these can be little mindfulness bells. Here's a believed expectation that's coming online in this relationship. So it's a signal to practice. And it's hard to do, right? Because in that moment, you want nothing more to do. You want to do nothing. You want to blame the other person more than anything. Right? And so it's so much easier just to continue with the blaming rather than to turn it around and look inward and see, face our own unresolved stuff, our unhealed pain and trauma. So I'm not saying this is necessarily easy, but this is the practice in relationships, and this is why it's such a powerful teacher. So we begin to understand that we're called in this moment to face our own unresolved stuff. We begin to see and investigate what is unfolding. Begin to see the believed thoughts, begin to see the perceptions, sensations in the body, tune into the heart space. Begin to see our deeply held, believed thoughts, beliefs. I'm not good enough. I am unworthy of a loving relationship. Deeply held thoughts, believed thoughts. These types of believed thoughts are at their root, our core unhealed pain and trauma. So we're really allowing this to surface. We're allowing it to surface, and we're turning toward what we've often spent our whole lives avoiding. So it takes, I believe it takes tremendous courage to practice in this way. Tremendous courage. And a deep aspiration to know the truth. Because we're really getting at these root fears, right? Very deep fears. We see that our lashing out comes from fear, or repressing and suppressing comes from fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of losing control, fear of our inadequacy being exposed. So many fears that are uncovered. So a key piece of the practice at this stage is, what is the fear that is present in this moment? So rather than suppressing or expressing, we look and see. I think that can be almost a mantra of relationships. Rather than suppressing or expressing, we look and see. I didn't intend that to be a mantra for the talk, but it sounded so good when it came out of this mouth that I think it kind of sums up so much of what I'm saying. We look and see. So we open our protected hearts, protected human heart. We become less defended. And we begin to see that all this suffering is a result of believed expectations, believed thoughts, which are based on perceived needs. So we can really become aware of these thoughts. So we really start to see how these thoughts, believing these thoughts and difficulties in relationship are so intertwined, so inextricably linked. Become aware of them. But this is also not enough. So we see the believed thoughts, and this is really important. But we need to go a step further and really feel into the constellation of body sensations that accompany it. So important to become aware in the body. And for me, I really become aware of the body, particularly in the heart space. In my practice, I really felt these believed expectations, and I felt the armor that I had put up around my heart. I could viscerally feel it in the chest area. So it became a real point of practice to breathe into and really feel that area of the body in particular. It may be different for you. I don't know. Like perhaps it manifests in different areas in the body. But I have heard from many that this is a core area of practice when we're looking at relationships. So we begin to see it all. That our relationship expectations are based on these core fears, and that it's simply a bunch of thoughts, perceptions, and sensations. Nothing more. Nothing more. It's just a collection of thoughts, body sensations, perceptions, beliefs, which is just another way of saying thoughts. It's nothing more. So we begin to see that. We really begin to see it. And this may go against what we've been taught, growing up, and we're not usually taught to allow and experience our lives. We're really, we're more taught to kind of think about it a lot and then move towards a defense strategy. Right? That's kind of how we're taught to deal with really. It's just think about it, kind of pros and cons. I don't know how many times I did that as a teenager, thinking about, relationships with girls as a teenager, with the pros and cons. And if I thought about it enough, I'd be able to figure it all out. And, it's like a math equation. I don't know. But that's how I, was taught. And then if it didn't work out, move quickly towards defense and protection. Right. And so this is quite different. Goes against in many ways what we're taught. So once we see all this, right, we see our expectations, they can really begin to dissolve. Begin to see this constellation of thoughts, perceptions, body sensations, our core fears, and how that relates to our relationship expectations. It all begins to dissolve. We're just seeing it. We're not doing anything about it. You really just have to see it. The seeing is the doing here. The seeing is the investigation here. Just seeing it, and it begins to dissolve, and what naturally emerges is the big heart, as I've called it in past sessions. The true heart, the unconditional love. Just kind of naturally emerges. And you can sense into that in the heart space as well. At least that's been my experience. So as I've often said, we don't have to open our hearts to be loving. Just allow the barriers to dissolve. And the already loving and open heart simply emerges. Should I say that again? We don't have to try to be loving. Simply allow the barriers to dissolve, these expectations to dissolve, these fears to dissolve. And the already loving and open heart simply displays itself. It's always there, it's like it springs forth. Like radiant light. You've heard that metaphor. Here's a little exercise before we end and open up for discussion. Think of someone that you have lots of judgments about. Someone that you're close to, actually, and somebody that you or somebody that you interact with a lot. And you've got lots of judgments about them, whatever they might be. So if you think of that person to yourself, it could be helpful as I explain the exercise, or you might think of the person later, someone that you have lots of judgments about. Now, for one day, when you're with this person, try noticing all the judgments, the criticism, and not believing them. Not believing them. It's the judgment comes up and just see it, not believing it. So when a judgment arises, you notice it, see it, but you don't solidify on it. Meaning you don't think about it or speak it. Don't solidify on it. That's one of Bhante Gunaratana's lines. He goes, oh, that's an interesting thought. Have you solidified on that? Bhante is one of his favorite, like that was one of his go-to lines when you said something that's kind of came out, it wasn't kind of a judgment or, oh, it's an interesting. Have you solidified on that? In other words, do you believe it? I think it's kind of a polite way for a Bhante to say, do you actually believe that shit? Or, so just notice it and don't solidify on it. Then experience the body sensations that accompany the judgmental thoughts. See what body sensations are present. So this exercise just simply enables us to see our judgments, that our judgments are not about the other person, that they're all about us. They're all about us. Nothing to do with the other person. They're all about us. I think you can also see that all beings want happiness. And actually, they want happiness, and all beings want their essential nature to reveal itself, to reveal. So we can't forget that this is happening for all of us. Even if we don't know it, it's happening. True nature is trying to reveal, even when we don't know it. You kind of recognize too that as the egoic selves, we're doing the best that we can. I had I did a problem, just something just occurred to me that is I had a practice years ago whereby let me just see if I get this straight in my head, if I invited somebody to get together, for example, invite another person or a couple over for dinner, and the other person said no, they couldn't make it, I would intentionally feel joy that this person had something better to do. I felt deep happiness. Oh wow, they have something better to do, something that's so enriching that they're doing that instead of having dinner. Can you feel that? Like, can you unconditional, the deep happiness? Oh wow, this person. There could be somebody very close, so that when you really enjoy it, but they have something that's so much more enriching that they're doing that instead, and feeling the deep happiness rather than the rejection. And I got that from Anthony DeMello, who I've mentioned numerous times here, who's not alive anymore, but he his practice was when somebody invited him and he couldn't make it, he'd say, "I'm sorry, I can't make it. I've got something better to do." And he would just say that. I've got, well, because it's honest, right? You can't make it. You've got something else, or a previous commitment, I guess it could be, but that was his practice. But I kind of liked it, doing it the other way, is just feeling the joy that the other person, if they say no, has something better to do. So they were relating from the big heart, not the little me that feels rejection. So I found it really helpful to relate to other people, and especially people that didn't meet my believed expectations from the big heart, from my essence, not from the little me. When we relate from, I hope you know what I mean by little me and egoic self. We've talked about this in the past, but I know some folks haven't haven't had those teachings. But when we relate from somewhere other than our true nature, so what I call the egoic self, what's there other than true nature, we naturally relate to the other person's little me or egoic self. So you've got two little me's relating. What's going to happen? What's inevitable? Conflict, difficulties. So if you get into that, into relationship difficulty, you just kind of go step back and go, "Oh, that was it. It was just little me relating to their little me. Two little me's. We had conflict. What else could happen? That's it. That's all that happened. Oh, here's big heart. I can relate from there now. I can see this and I can relate from there now. What happens when you do that? It all just dissolves. It's seen for what it is. We see that when the wants and the judgments of two egos interact, egoic selves interact, conflict's inevitable. So there's no use being surprised. You can just see it. This is what's happened. And when two essential natures or essences relate, the only thing that can emerge is unconditional love. Happiness just emerges naturally. And it's not a happiness based on our expectations being met or getting what we needed or having, our expectations met. It's a happiness based on relating from our deepest and truest nature. It's that the true connectedness. It's what John Wellwood would call perfect love. So I'll end it there and open it up for any questions, any comments. I've said a lot of different things, and maybe perhaps challenged, as I often probably do intentionally, some of the believed thoughts that you might have about relationship difficulties. So what's coming up for folks? I'd love to hear it.
Stephen, everyone, thank you for that. The coin kind of dropped the last 3 minutes of that for me. So I don't have any attachments I feel right now in my life, nor do I have any expectations of anyone, whether it's people that I know or don't know. But I do have fear, and that's something that's come up recently. And upon further investigation, my fear is basically when there's something beautiful and wholesome, that's going to go. that's going to disappear. It's going to go. So the fear of grief, I suppose, which I've had before. But when you said unconditional love, that kind of flipped the script for me. So it's kind of like if there was somebody and you're having something beautiful and wholesome, and that person was to go, if it is true unconditional love, then even though there might be some sadness there, there's also the love with it. So I suppose as I'm thinking about it out loud, it's kind of like there can be sadness and peace. And I think that maybe that helps to reconcile the fear, maybe. But anyway, so the unconditional love really helped to bring it all together for me. So that's what I've got going on up here right now. So thank you.
So the fear, the fear that, can you say what, I want to just hear you put words to it again, what exactly the fear is before I respond.
The fear of loss, the fear of that beautiful thing going away.
Ah, okay,
No
that's
longer
what.
being there. Yeah, the fear of grieving. Yes.
Yeah, fear of, so it's an insecurity kind of in the relationship that it might end, and
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, and to be clear, not an insecurity in myself, but in the connection at some point ending.
Ending.
Yes.
So that's a healthy fear.
Oh, good.
It's probably not what I thought I was going to say. Thought I was going to say something like, with feel of. So why do I say that? So we we cannot find security and happiness in any object, whether it be our jobs, money, status, what else? Identities of any kind, relationships, right? So we can't find happiness in any of those, like true happiness. We can't find happiness, security in any object. And that's often what we're seeking now, right? So this fear, this, I call it a kind of a sense that, it could end, and then it will end. Everything, all of these objects that we seek happiness in, it will end. And they're by their very nature impermanent, so they will never provide lasting satisfaction and happiness. So it's a very healthy, recognize it's I think for you, it's probably almost an intuition that's arising. Oh, I'm not going to find happiness in this because it's going to end. Yes, it is going to end, and you will not be permanently find permanent happiness in that. So where can you find this causeless, unconditioned happiness, security? Right? If you can't find it in relationships, you can't find it in identities, where can you find it?
With myself. Were you asking me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm asking anybody, but yeah, what's it look like? Yeah.
I could touch on that. I really feel for me a big shift in this realm of, I've went a long time feeling that unsatisfied with relationships, and feeling that kind of that little emptiness inside with respect to relationships, and coming to the realization that that actually came to me reflecting about desire. Because I just, I was like having this desire, like, oh, I really feel like I want to have a relationship, and just sitting with the desire, the felt sense of that desire, and yet making the realization that desire, that every desire that I have, there's nothing wrong with the desire, absolutely nothing. It's that it's my mind has been wired for many reasons to think that desire is going to bring me a lasting happiness. And how many times have we talked about impermanence here? But it's like, for some reason, it just sunk in at that moment. And it was like a huge shift for me. And it just was like almost like a light switch went off to say, you know what, it's okay. These desires are okay, but there's no permanence to it. And there's like almost like this, like, okay, well, I don't really have to control things in this realm anymore. I just let go and see what happens. And that's totally fine. Actually, that's way better than always craving to be in a relationship. So that's my own personal experience. Just kind of, I've reflected on impermanence and desire and all these things, probably, hundreds of times before, but for some reason, it just kind of, that at that particular moment was like, oh yeah. I don't know why, but on a felt level, it's like, yeah, this makes sense now.
Say something.
Yeah, Delia, yeah, sure.
Isn't the most important relationship the relationship that you have with self? If you find happiness within yourself, you will find that happiness with whoever you encounter. Yesterday, we went to see Anne Juliet. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a big production before it goes to Broadway. It was so powerful, and it was all based on relationships. Like, Juliet really didn't need Romeo herself. But it was, and I don't know, that's what I've learned in these last few years. And COVID has arisen it even more. The most important relationship is the relationship within myself, and that I'm happy, and that I find happiness. And when I'm happy, all those around me are happy, and I build stronger relationships with other people. But I don't want to become everybody's best friend. I don't want that, because I've been hurt so much that I don't want that. I just want to have a good relationship with them, and then we move on.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, that's the way you get along with everybody in life. Like, when you travel, when you see people, it's just building that relationship. And a relationship of, I love art, but I didn't really start developing it until I turned it, until I became 60. And I will sit there and look at a piece and say, okay, what is that artist trying to tell me? What is the relationship with me in that painting? So I don't think the relationship is just a romantic relationship and with other people. I think it's your relationship with the world. And that's why it has to come from within. Maybe I'm off topic because I never studied. Okay, that's all I have to say.
So it goes back to, if we can't find a lasting happiness, from objects in the world, including relationships, identities, art, whatever it might be. My question was, where do we find this unconditional, uncaused, you could say, happiness? And you were talking about it being, the relationship with yourself. And self can be, we can talk about self in different ways. I know some people talk about true self being your true nature. It's a confusing word if it gets used to mean different, but it's really you're connecting with your true nature, your essential nature. The Vedas would call that your true self, not your egoic self. And that's really what that's where this unconditioned happiness resides. It's always there. It's just clouded over by all this, what the Buddha called clinging, the grasping and pushing away, wanting things to be different than they are.
So it's the letting go.
Yeah, the surrender, letting go.
And let it be.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's starting to work. Letting go of objects, even relationships that don't work, like letting them go.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So can you think of a recent relationship where you've had difficulties, and you maybe perhaps relate from what I've said a little bit to that relationship? Was there a expectation that the person should be something other than they are? It's really interesting, other people may have an expectation for you to be other than you are too. Yeah. And can you see how freeing it is to just allow people to be as they are? I mean, you can have preferences, as I said, right? You prefer a person to be, that's fine. But your love's not dependent on them meeting that preference. Yeah.
See,
yeah.
Sorry, I I had one question, but I'll say what I wanted to say first was, this another realization this week, talking with a couple friends, was that, like this, the power of the present moment. I mean, everything, the present moment is everything. It's really all that exists. I don't know who I've heard this from, but another word is the eternal now. Like, all of eternity is captured in our present moment, and the past is actually, all the past is our it's created by the present moment. So we can actually recreate our past in any moment simply by having insight and being able to see past causes and conditions that have kind of been put into us. And that is amazing to think of that. Like, we actually can change our pasts in our own minds, which I think is super, I can really relate to that, because I've seen that, in myself, like, as I've done these practices. And I think, the more that we just can accept the present moment as just being the way it is, it can't be any other way. The present moment feels like it's really, that's where that's our true nature, is the present moment. Anyways, that's me up on my soapbox. And the question I had was, what would you say? I really feel like I've been feeling lately like there's little difference between desires and preferences. So I'm, you know, because if you're not, to me, if you're not if you're not, you know, attaching yourself or clinging to a desire, I mean, it doesn't feel much different than you're attaching when you attach or cling yourself to a preference. So I'm just wondering if there's any subtle difference that or if they're pretty much can be viewed as being the same thing.
One way to put it would be that we hold desires tend to be strong wants that must be met in order for us to be happy. Things that things, I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, but the way we usually use that word is kind of a want that we desire it to the point where we're grasping for it. We believe that we need that in order to be happy or secure or, you know, something. A preference, and these are just words, right? I mean, the preference, the way I was using it tonight, and the way I said, you know, you can have preferences, but they're them meeting your preference. You know, it doesn't. You'll still love them unconditionally, regardless of whether they meet your preference. I mean, we all have, in our relative existence, we all have preferences. So if I asked you to tell me your, you know, favorite ice cream, you'd probably give, and if you like ice cream, you'd probably answer that in some way, or maybe you like all ice cream, I don't know, but you know, what's your favorite dessert or favorite meal, or, you know, those are kinds of, you know, I have preferences for the kind of people I kind of hang out with, right? And preferences for objects even that I have around me. Got lots of Buddhas. I don't know. I went through a Buddha stage. Got lots of bells. So I go through these, you know, you go through these are preferences, but of course, am I attached to this bell? Like, could I give this bell to you? Or would I feel a loss? Or could I just had a preference for, it's actually kind of a cool bell. It's got all these kind of bang marks where it was actually made in Nepal, and it's kind of, so I really have a preference for this bell, but so I might but yeah, I hope you get the feel for it. It's just a preference, but it doesn't mean that, you know, I'm attached to it or I have to have it, or it's non-existence would end my, you know, affect my happiness in some way. I think it's not the preferences that causes suffering, it's our attachment to our preferences such that they become desires that cause us our suffering. The third Zen patriarch has a famous poem. I forget how it goes, but something like, you know, the way is simple for those with no preferences, meaning the way to awakening, enlightenment is simple. And I heard a teacher say that translation actually should read, the way is simple for those with no attachment to their preferences. Right? The way is simple for so there's preferences are just there. But it's the attachment to them that causes the suffering, which turns into desire and grasping and clinging. And I have to have this in order to be happy. So I hope that hopefully that paints the picture that in the way in which I often use that word preferences comes from that viewpoint, if there is such a thing. Yeah. Of course, let go of your preferences too. It's not going to hurt. Like eat any ice cream. I'm almost to the point now where people don't even ask me what I want because they know I'll just say, everything's good. Yeah, in fact, I kind of like all food. I don't really have preferences anymore for food. It's just all good. I probably have a preference for vegetables if I'm not having any. Like you go to a barbecue, I probably have a little preference for more veg. But so preferences do soften to the point where they almost disappear as you go through this practice. Perhaps you notice that as well. Yeah, I'll end it there. Anything else? Any relationship difficulties everybody wants to tell the whole group about? I'm just kidding. It's the story is really not much. It doesn't help much to share the story, but it's really seeing through the story, seeing through the belief, seeing the belief thoughts. So I'll end it there unless something's on somebody's mind. And I don't know what'll happen next week. I will be here, and I think I'll continue with the relationship theme. See where it goes. I worked at it a couple deeper levels. So maybe I'll take it to there are issues around trust. That's a word that I might take off from for next week. Because it's a word that often gets raised in discussions around relationships. You can't trust that person anymore because they did X. So that could be, we'll explore that next week. How's that sound? Good. And thank you all for coming on these beautiful summer days. Appreciate your presence, and I enjoy doing this with you. I enjoy it immensely.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Guess that's a preference.
Happy
Yeah.
Canada Day, everybody.
Yeah, happy Canada Day. Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thankful to be living in this wonderful country.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.